Hello and a very warm welcome to this edition of Public Forum. Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is on his maiden visit to Indian Ocean countries. In the last leg of his visit, he's in Sri Lanka, where the two countries have signed 4 agreements. The MOUs are on visa exemptions for official passport holders, customs cooperation, youth exchanges and education, and the construction of a university auditorium. Besides this, Mr. Modi has announced an e-visa on arrival services for Sri Lankans, a $318 million line of credit to upgrade Sri Lanka's railways, and a promise to build Trincomalee as a petroleum hub. Prime Minister also said that as closest neighbours, there should be more frequent engagements between India and Sri Lanka so that the two countries can understand each other's problems. So in today's edition of Public Forum, we discuss the significance and outcome of Prime Minister's Sri Lanka visit. Right, and joining me in the program is Ambassador N.N. Jha, who joins me on the program. I'm also joined by Professor Ramani from the South Asian University, and I'm also joined by Mr. Shekhar Iyer, who's the political editor with Deccan Herald. Welcome to the program. Would like to start the discussion with you, Ambassador Jha, since there are some very interesting developments that have taken place between India and Sri Lanka, but what's very crucial is that this happens to be the first visit of an Indian Prime Minister after 28 years. And if I have to put it in the way that the Foreign Minister also said, that the Sri Lankan Foreign Minister also said, which is that India and Sri Lanka are just 26 miles apart, but it took an Indian Prime Minister 27 years to come to Sri Lanka on the bilateral visit. How do you look at that?
Well, all I can say is very unfortunate. Mr. Narasimha Rao was there once, but that was for a SAARC summit in 1992, end of 1992. Just a one-day visit for SAARC summit, so that's not a bilateral visit. Mr. Manmohan Singh was expected to arrive there for a Commonwealth summit almost 2 years ago, but he didn't go there, so that was that. So it is after July 1987 when the India-Sri Lanka agreement was signed. This is really the first visit by Indian Prime Minister to that country.
And do you think it's quite significant, since Prime Minister Modi was almost at all the areas of political and strategic significance, and the fact that he addressed the Sri Lankan Parliament? He was in Jaffna today. How do you look at that?
You know, this in his address to the Sri Lanka Parliament, he has, I think, mentioned a few very important points which should be reassuring to them. First of all, he said that it is in India's interest that we support always united and sovereign Sri Lanka, indivisible Sri Lanka. Secondly, he's also mentioned, given the Indian example, that strengthening diversity in a particular manner of speaking strengthens the overall nationalism and nationality, or rather the unity of a country. And he's given examples of greater financial devolution to the states. I mean, you are probably referring to the recent Finance Commission decision to increase the grants by 10%. So this is a very good, because in Sri Lanka, the word federal is anathema, is something that they're not fond of. And they refer to our constitution also, and they rightly say that, look, you not use the word federal. India is a union of states, not union. It's not a federal. It's federal in structure, but it's a union of states. So we have the situation. And the second thing he's said, the fact that he's gone to Jaffna also means that India remains committed to 13th Amendment, and that he said so openly also. 13th Amendment and perhaps more. And that is reassuring not only to the Tamils there, but also to Tamil Nadu state. Now, as far as I'm aware, Tamil Nadu state, there was never any great sympathy for the LTT itself per se, but there is considerable sympathy for the plight of the Tamils across the border, across the waters in the northern and eastern part of Sri Lanka. So that's a different thing altogether. So this would help to reassure them also, and at the same time reassure the TNA and other members of the Sri Lanka Tamil political fraternity.
Okay. Professor Ramani, how do you look at the significance of this meeting, given the gap that both India and Sri Lanka, the time gap that has been there in these bilateral visits, and also keeping in mind that a lot of thrust has been given to the economic ties here?
No, I mean, just taking what Ambassador Jha is saying a little forward, I was like thinking there is a lot of confidence activity that was generated in the last 2 days. And I think this meeting is important largely to look at the fact that, yes, both these governments and both the countries have a tremendous confidence of the people reflected in their the methodology that they have come into power. So I think this is the best time, probably this is the best time for them to actually talk in more concrete terms. In fact, I was looking at some kind of a significant statement coming out rather than just this MOU. I was like hoping that the free trade agreement that is there would actually look at more areas, because probably no other government in the previous 28 years that you were referring to had this much amount of mandate of the people to actually take things forward. So I think this is the best time. If it has to happen, then probably we can't be asking for a better timing than now.
And there is more to read in the gestures here. Mr. Iyer, do you think that, Sri Lanka also stretched that hand before India really did? Because there we also saw the newly elected president making his first visit to India, choosing India as the place where he should be visiting to mark his, maiden visits abroad. The change, the transitions that have happened within Sri Lanka, that of course clearly reflecting there. And at the same time, a lot of political as well as international developments between these two countries. How do you look at that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I rather see three things that have happened, in the last few months, which is, the first time probably where India and Sri Lanka are able to actually address the situation that has changed since the 2009 war. Because the first 5 years since that war was held hostage to the political demands of Tamil Nadu political parties, as well as the pressure that was being built on the UPA government on account of the allies it had in Tamil Nadu. And consequently, the last 5 years, the major issues between India and Sri Lanka could not be addressed because it was caught in that Tamil issue, the problems of the plight of the Sri Lankan Tamils, and also the effects of that war, and the demand for justice, and the huge campaign by human rights groups about the war atrocities. So those things, dominated the mind space of both the countries. Because you had the Sri Lankan president, the then President Rajapaksa, also battling those allegations, and we saw how UPA government itself went through a crisis period where you had one of the constituents of the UPA, the Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam, the DMK, putting pressure, particularly when the UN Human Rights Council was meeting. So now we are past that stage. Here is a new situation. Rajapaksa is gone there. The Tamil Nadu party is no longer. Now the problem there is not so much about the plight of Sri Lankan Tamils. Now the issue is between the Indian Tamil fishermen and the Sri Lankan Tamil fishermen.
Absolutely.
So, the issues have got down to much more to the ground level rather to the water level. Yeah. And so this is an absolute new situation. And also you have had a change of government here, and Prime Minister Modi has had the good fortune of inheriting a new situation where essentially it's about the development of Sri Lanka. If you recall, there was this Colombo Declaration last year when Rajapaksa was here, and several things, in fact a year ago, when a lot of things were promised what India would do there and what Sri Lanka would do, particularly on trade, business, huge potential that each other, all these things are there, but both the countries are now moving forward. Now, along with this is the other thing that you mentioned in your question, that's about the strategic interests, where obviously it's about the C word, So those things are there, but both countries are poised for a takeoff.
Okay. As, again, I'll be quoting the Sri Lankan minister who said that it's like another era in India-Sri Lanka ties. And the fact that the visa on arrival, something that India has planned to extend to Sri Lanka, is seen as some sort of a gift from India to Sri Lanka, in the minister's words. That would certainly send a very, very positive signal. How do you look at that, sir? Because the moment Sri Lankans look at it as another era of a change or some sort of a transition into India and Sri Lanka relations, is more to do with the Tamil issue as to how India really looks at that.
As far as the visa problem is concerned, the various circulars of the Ministries of Home Affairs and External Affairs have always indicated or denoted Sri Lanka as one of the countries in whose citizens, in some cases, visa requirement would have referred to Delhi or request would be referred to Delhi, and others would not be given on the spot on arrival. So this is a very, and they are aware of it. It's nothing of this type remains a secret. Now, the fact that Mr. Modi has announced this in Colombo itself, this would be a very much step forward, because the extent of Buddhist tourism and also medical tourism to India is enormous from Sri Lanka. And the pilgrimage also, Tamil Hindus also come here, mainly about Tamil Nadu and other parts of South India. But Buddhist tourism and as I said, this these are matters on which they attach great deal of importance to, and this will help in one way. There are four Buddhist chapters there. Two of them are the main ones, Mahasangha, two of them, the Askariya and Manvate. Now, their heads are very powerful, both politically and culturally and among the Sinhala masses. And Chinese have been cultivating them over, very, very gradually, gently over the years. And it's very important that we do the same. I think we've begun to do the same. I think there's a photograph of Mr. Modi going with a basket of flowers and offering his felicitations to the Buddhist monks there. So all this is very good, and we should carry this on, because when I was there, I had gotten the Askariya chap to come on a 15-day tour, Buddhist circuit tourism in India, and he went back extremely pleased. Now, this has to be maintained on a continuous basis. The embassy must invite them, and so on and so forth, because an invitation card from an Indian ambassador or high commissioner to any neighboring country is valued immensely, and it raises the man's stature among his neighbors. It's, believe it or not, that's true in all our neighboring countries. So this you might keep in mind also.
And
so
the cultural
these little
relations,
gestures are very important.
Ties, these are the very softer ways of dealing with countries, and of course people-to-people contact gets expanded through this. But Professor Ramani, I would like to ask you again about the economic part, because there are, of course, we'll go into it deeper, one by one. But one of the crucial things which the Prime Minister also said was that India's size should not hurt the neighbors. The fact that this kind of cooperation between these two countries ensure that the trade concerns that Sri Lanka has towards India can be addressed.
Yeah, actually the Colombo Chambers of Commerce has actually had its own misgivings with the working of the free trade agreement, and I think this visa on arrival that we were talking about, if it was reciprocated, probably the services industry in Sri Lanka can take a major benefit from it, and then that portion can actually reflect in the reduction of the trade deficits. That's something that the Colombo Chambers of Commerce is apprehensive about. So I think probably the Sri Lankan government can actually look at, expanding the visa on arrival system in their own country so that it can affect. Then that's one. And secondly, I think, as Ambassador Jha was saying, Sri Lanka is also a very important Buddhist destination, so that can take a major benefit out of it. And then, under the free trade agreement, again, there are areas where if we can bring in the services, probably we can be a lot of value creation for Sri Lanka in, say, construction industry, consultation services. I mean, these are the areas where we need to move forward. I mean, we need to show that those softer diplomacy that we had actually brought in. And like I was saying earlier also, this is the best time to actually follow it up. So that's what we were actually expecting in this visit. I mean, we thought that MOU should have contained so much more in actually taking that step a little forward.
Okay. And at this point of time, Ms. Gulbeen Sultana, who's a researcher with IDSA, also joins me on the panel. Ms. Sultana, very quickly, we'll take a word from you regarding the Prime Minister's visit to Sri Lanka. How crucial and significant do you think it is at this juncture?
This is very significant because I'm sure you already have discussed that this is the first time an Indian Prime Minister is visiting after 27 years. And this is significant particularly because when there is change of government in Sri Lanka, and they have expressed their intention that they want to develop in Sri Lanka's relations with India. In that case, it is very significant, I can feel. And also Narendra Modi has talked about that he is focusing on neighborhood policy.
Right.
So in that sense, I feel this is very significant, and particularly when this is a very crucial time in Sri Lanka. The new government has come, and they various policy shifts are going on in Sri Lanka. So in that sense, I think at this point, this is very significant visit.
This is very significant. But you know, Mr. Shekhar Iyer, if I ask you this, because the Prime Minister has, as I said in the beginning too, has touched many chords here. It makes a lot of sense that he goes to the Sri Lankan Parliament, addresses their political parties there, the political fabric there, and talks about the 13th Amendment, says that I would like to see the 13th Amendment implemented. He also urges the parties to follow the principle of cooperative federalism, something that he wants to even practice it here in India. How do you look at you know, these statements made by him?
See, Modi's approach to this Indo-Sri Lankan ties is part of his whole, idea of how India should go about this region. And the fact that he combined with his visit to these Indian Ocean countries shows, a lot of thinking has gone into how to go about it. And we have seen in the last elections in Sri Lanka where the Tamil parties actually, they backed the opposition leader. That's how you got that kind of victory. So this problem of the Tamil parties, particularly the Tamil government which is there in the north there, they had the election, but since then, they were their fate or their situation was similar to the other opposition parties in the island. So they have been also waiting for a change where, because the 13th Amendment became a completely banned word in the island.
Right.
Because Rajapaksa was very clear what he wanted, because he had the backing of the Buddhist clergy. But now a new situation has come where the new president, he has a different view about this. It doesn't mean that overnight, the clergy influence will change, or everything is going to change in the island. No. But there is some mood to listen to what the Tamil parties are saying, what the Tamil people in the north have been feeling since the war, because the war is over. Now it's time some kind of a normalcy is brought there, because people are still very upset about the military camps, the kind of security checks that goes on, and how the life is not yet normal, and there is a fear all along. And it's time, when you're talking of development, you're talking of railway lines, you're talking of taking a train from Colombo to Jaffna and even beyond. When all this is happening, some kind of political devolution is absolutely necessary, because for the economic progress to happen, the Tamil people there should feel, all right. So Modi has his own style of conveying to them, look, because he has also spoken about how we managed the problems here. So therefore, this is an example. And if you notice, there is no top-down approach, because we know that our bigger interest in Sri Lanka is the fact is that if the unstated part is, we are competing with China there. Because China is a huge factor. China has made a lot of investments there. It's not that we can go and displace China.
Absolutely.
But what we are looking for is we should be able to play along with China there. In the sense that, so the whole idea is, if you want to engage your neighbor, you have to make all the right noises, and that's what is happening. So we are giving them credit where we can help, because I remember particularly when that Delhi declaration was there, when Rajapaksa had come during Manmohan Singh, there were several things that was listed, full of ideas, how India could help in the field of education, how we could train. Even, there were some very, very elementary issues which the Sri Lanka has been battling. For instance, need to train people who can teach English education in the island, so that the youth get a lot of opportunity. These are some things which India can easily do it, and India can do it better than China. Or in terms of developing software, professionals there.
That's right.
So these are very practical things which we can do. But at the same time, Modi is aware that we cannot match the kind of capital that China can bring in, because China has huge resources
already,
in its command.
which is already done the kind of investment and the kind of planning that China has done.
Because I think the approach is do not compete when you don't have the edge. But we can also try our best.
Okay. Well, I can take this discussion forward and then come to the political aspect a little later. But let me first touch upon that part. That is, his meeting with the Tamil National Alliance leaders, Ambassador Jha, and the fact that he said that be patient with the Sri Lankan government, give them time. There is, of course, a lot of transition which has happened. Your country has been more bold in taking the steps now, and it's a different era which is now taking, which is now rising. How do you look at these on the sidelines, the meetings that he has done, and the ideas that he's tried to convey as an Indian Prime Minister?
You know, my impression is, and this is something based on hearsay from the MEA and others, that he wants to give the government about a year to settle down after there's a lot of backlog to clear. And more than that, the re-establishment of a climate of confidence between the Tamils and Sinhalas in Sri Lanka will take some time. And Rajapaksa's regime did not help in that regard at all the last 5 years since the LTT was eliminated. So this is what he'll have to do, and I think they will listen to him, because I mean he's gone with a tremendous build-up there, because he has been to the other neighboring countries, other countries, and they are aware of it. So they expect that he'll give good advice to Tamils, and his advice which the Sri Lankan government would not at all mind. They would like it. Now, once we do get to the devolution point, one of the suggestions I can make is that in case a year hence, let's say early next year, the Sri Lankan government is still reticent about devolving powers, well, we can suggest to them that, look, give it piecemeal. Start with finances. See, police power is the last thing they'll give. They'll not give that straight away. But they can start with finances, greater financial powers, and so on. And there's something which Mr. Iyer mentioned about not competing with the Chinese. See, we can't compete with them as so far as doling out money is concerned. There are two points I want to mention. This applies to all our neighboring countries. Whatever commitment we make, maybe they're only half of the Chinese amount, but for God's sake, finish it in time. If otherwise, or at least before time. And secondly, they should be visible to people also. For example, in Kathmandu, when I was posted there many years, I'm talking 40 years ago, already there were Chinese visible projects. I mean, there was a trolley bus service to one of the suburban areas, and the ring road and all that. Hundreds of people, thousands were traveling every day on it. It's visible. Then later on, they built the conference hall, where the first SAARC summit was held in 1987 there. So similarly, in Colombo, we have to put in projects which are completed in time, if possible, a little before time, and we get some mileage out of it, and also which are visible. So people can point to it. I'm glad this Tagore Center is going to be set up, and I hope that acts as a beacon in that regard.
Okay. Professor Ramani, how do you look at the fact that there is, of course, a mention of how India's satellite for the SAARC region would be in space soon? I mean, what I really found is very significant was that the Prime Minister was trying to rope in all the key things or key developments which we have seen in his tenure as Prime Minister, connecting it with what Sri Lanka can gain out of it in the long run. Of course, there was an undercurrent of a lot of things, but if you ask the bigger way of cooperating with Sri Lanka, one would say it could be a campaign like a Digital India, or for that matter, how the service sector or the software industry can really be of some help. And as Ambassador Jha also said, something in a visible sense, which can really, the kind of help which India can really provide to Sri Lanka.
Yeah, actually, just to take what Ambassador Jha was saying a little forward, I think the Prime Minister made all the right noises. But the only thing that I'm actually looking at, because of the tremendous emotional value that he brought in, and also the kind of support that he has in back home, I think there should have gone a little more on the concrete steps. For example, I was just going through the free trade agreement again. I just get back to that point, just to show where, probably we could actually do something much more concrete to, to compete with China. I know what Mr. Iyer says is like, but then in international relations, all of us have to compete with each other to have the best possible share. So in case we want to do it, then there's one place where both, I think, India and Sri Lanka need to actually look at, and that's with regard to the kind of documentation that we do for our trade processes. A cursory look at the stuff just tells us that there are about 7 to 8 documents that are required. But if the trade between any of these countries within the SAARC regions is any kind of an example, these 7 documents are actually 150 odd documents. Only because our governance and procurement systems in both these countries, apart from the other countries of the SAARC, are a major problem. And Sri Lanka has a history of difficulties with its procurement process also. So if at all we need to take this forward, I think both within our country, that trust factor needs to show up in our documentation process as one example. Because most of us, whatever the kind of sound bites that the Prime Minister has given us are very interesting, but then that has to, that trust factor has to get converted into some of our governance systems also.
Okay, we will now try to look at one of the important issues here. Professor Ramani, I would like to start with you. You know, the fact that we've been talking so much about the economy and the business aspect. You know, one more thing which has surfaced during his visit is that he was, of course, calling it his visit to all the Indian Ocean countries, and the fact that India till date doesn't have a policy for the Indian Ocean countries. Something which really has been one of the talking points of the fact that India now wants to cash in on the blue economy, also have a blue policy there to address that issue. And do you think that with ties on energy, on economy and other fronts, we are really heading in that direction? But we still need a lot of clarity when it comes to really defining an approach to be partners with these countries in long run.
Yeah, like I began with saying, this is the best time to take 2 things forward with Sri Lanka. One is we need to bring the 1974 agreement to light in the parliament on the Kachativu. I think we need to put curtains down on that, and then because like Mr. Iyer was saying earlier, yes, this has become a hostage for previous the politics of the previous governments, but I think this government is in a better position to address that. The second one that I would really want to hear something about is the Setu Samudram shipping canal project, which would actually lead to a lot of value creation for the northern region, especially probably a possible development of the port at Talai Mannar. I know there has been opposition probably from the Colombo business groups and the Colombo political pressure groups, but then at some point of time these things need to be addressed. So I think that taking forward, if at all the northern region has to have a lot of value creation, then these 2 things need to be addressed, and possibly going forward this could actually be some kind of a template for the Modi government on the Indian Ocean countries policy.
But you know, the fact that India has expressed its commitment to a resolution of a lot of issues, Mr. Iyer, do you think these are 2-3 different areas where simultaneously we will see some sort of you know, movement from Indian side too?
Yeah, because one, you know, Professor Ramani was mentioning about this Kachativu issue and the fishing issue. Last week we saw the External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj actually explain how the India is actually looking at the problem.
Right.
That the problem is about how our fishermen, particularly those who operate off Rameshwaram, you know, they have been into the small boats and they have been doing this fishing, particularly the straying into those waters which they consider are disputed. And the whole thing is about how they must shift into more deep sea fishing. And that's a big thing, and they need, our fishermen need a lot of help, because and you know, there are of course the questions were raised in Parliament when she made the statement about are we confusing with the bottom trawling. Sushma was very clear. She said no, this is not bottom trawling, this is deep sea fishing. Our fishermen must be equipped with better boats, better equipment and better navigational aids, so that they can go further into the deep sea, which they are not doing right now. All that they do is they have a small motorboat which probably runs on diesel or kerosene or whatever, and you know, in another about say a couple of hours they are into those places. And actually the catch door is falling. And what has happened in the northern Sri Lanka is where, you know, after the return of peace, the Sri Lankan Tamil fishermen, they too are venturing out to, you know, get their catch. So that's where you have the clash, and now the government of Sri Lanka is also duty bound to see that, you know, these 2 people don't get into some kind of a problem. So
just to come in on that point, actually Indian fishermen did not have, I mean if we look at the accord that was signed in 1974, that particular accord did not make any kind of a fishing rights for Indian fishermen near those islands. But probably because the Sri Lankan Tamil fishermen were not having that much of a economic activity in those waters at that point of time, Indian fishermen could actually go there and have their catch. But then it was not actually a valid claim that they had over that activity. They had access to the island only for their drying out their fishing nets and to have an access to some kind of a church that exists there, and they have a festival. But then they never had that access as a fishing activity. So somewhere I think we need to get into a more technology oriented fishing activity where, you know, it's not going to cost much. A GPS device can be positioned
something that has been also, you know,
Yeah.
a part of the
just a
government's
couple of thousands,
plan too,
nothing
whether,
much.
whether a GPS
But
can
I
really
think first time, you know, the government of India is serious about, you know, improving the quality of fishing in that region. You know, already, in fact, they have been called for talks, both the Fishermen
Right,
Association of
right.
Sri Lanka as well as from
India.
to
Yeah.
meet, and actually, because this is not going to be a long-term solution. You know,
Okay.
getting permission, and Kachitivi, I think, is more or less clear. The government, at least our government, is clear. That is not the issue that can be reopened, though there is a petition
Yeah.
pending in Supreme Court.
Right, right. Ms. Sultana, your take on this fisherman issue and the protection of fishing rights.
Exactly. I feel I agree with you that deep sea fishing provision should be actually initiated by this government, because we have to understand that what Tamil fishermen, they find it problematic is Indian fishermen are using trawlers, which is banned in Sri Lanka, one. Secondly, this is not good for ecology. Actually, when you use the trawler, it's not good for ocean ecology. That's why I feel Indian fishermen should not use the trawlers. But the problem here is, I think the fishermen, they are just fishing for somebody else. These trawler owners are there. They have links with, they are like businessmen, rich businessmen in South India. So I think they have to take up this issue that don't go for trawling. Stop those trawling and go for deep sea fishing. But for deep sea fishing, Indian fishermen are not capable for deep sea fishing, and they have to be trained. And again, for deep sea fishing, they cannot just buy a bigger boats. They have, I think deep sea fishing, they should have storing capabilities and other storage capabilities, everything. So subsidy should be given from government side. So government should take the initiative, and they should be trained.
I mean, like what she is saying, just to take it forward, unfortunately, the government of India's policy with regard to deep sea fishing is somewhere coming into clash, because we have opened up our waters for, you know, external non-regional participation, and the cost and the value that these non-regional participants bring in is much more than what like our fishermen can afford.
And another point here, like if when they are going to Sri Lankan side, because they don't know how, they don't have the capability, they can't go for deep sea fishing. That's why Indian fishermen are going there. But if they go for deep sea fishing, actually they'll be able to catch more fish there. So that way it will help. But the initiative should be from government side.
You know, there was, in fact, there are different theories about it, Ambassador Jha. In fact, several set of suggestions too. One of them being, why can't India and Sri Lanka have a common pool where fishing can be done at that contentious point of Kachativu and the surrounding area? The fact that, Ambassador Jha, do you think any sort of clarity can now be found out, because the Prime Minister has said it, because there is going to be a meeting between with the Indian fishermen group and the Sri Lankan fishermen group, and this would be one of the issues, as you said, visible efforts. If at all we sort out this particular issue, I'm sure there will be a lot of positive signals.
This is one issue which can cause more than occasional friction between the two countries. Now, I would suggest a way out would be, I mean, I'm sure there are many other ways. We talk to the Sri Lankans and have a agreement to say over a 2-year period that these fishermen will spend some time fishing in their areas also. The catch will be reduced from the first year to the second year. It gives us time in those 2 years or so, whatever is decided, to equip them with better facilities, including cold storage facilities on their trawlers, to go into the Bay of Bengal and fish. Around the Andaman and Nicobar Island area, there's very rich in fish. And Japanese come there all the way from Japan, the fishermen, to trawlers to fish there. Surely our chaps can go, it's only about 800 miles. it's not all that far.
So then why is it that, you know, despite the fact that something as clear as this can be done, we haven't been able to move forward in that
no one
direction?
has given up. Not that too many. There are not too many people given this idea. But it's better late than never. So this is unnecessary cause of friction which doesn't help at all.
Absolutely, and a very unnecessary cause of friction. I'm sure we all agree that there
Central
can be
government,
solutions.
Tamil Nadu government, and maybe ADB or somebody else can chip in and help out both. And we can let the Sri Lankan fishermen also fish in the areas around Andamans, for example. Why not? Nothing wrong with plenty of fish there.
Okay, Mr. Iyer, what's your take on
Yeah,
this?
I think I remember in the 80s there was a FAO program, Bay of Bengal project, which was supposed to improve quality of fishing in those areas, and that needs to be revisited. And I think a Tamil translation of that famous book, Who Moved My Cheese, should be handed to each of them, and you know, the cheese will keep moving. So you will have to look for new cheese, and more you search for the new cheese, the old cheese will appear stale and you will give it up. Otherwise, the short-term solution, and I think the biggest advantage now is if the problem between India and Sri Lanka now is reduced to just about this fishing, which is actually the friction remaining. And Colombo now believes, truly believes, that this is right now a situation in India where whatever New Delhi is saying has nothing to do with politics in Tamil Nadu. Because in Tamil Nadu also, things have changed. You know, now you find the groups like, say, Vaiko's MDMK or other fringe groups, you know, they are not able to, you know, gather that kind of local support. Just 5 years ago, you had a human chain, you know, on issues like this when there was a vote in the UN Human Rights Council.
Right.
Now, those things have changed because I think in Tamil Nadu also people realize that, look, nothing is going to change. You know, you have to work with, you know, after all, the Sri Lankan politicians come to Tamil Nadu astrologers for their future politics. So this is because the cultural ties are too strong.
Too strong.
And this needs a very, very practical approach. And I think Modi will be very serious about this because he mentioned this deep sea fishing in his address also there. So I think we will see some action. We will see some, as Ambassador Jha was pointing out, why do you let you know, trawlers coming from Thailand, from Indonesia, from Taiwan? So many times it has happened. And of course, we must also realize there will be situations where you will have, like we saw the Prime Minister, you know, giving an interview to the Tandi TV, which was also kind of a message, you know, if they come, we will shoot them. And then we had a, you know, it's not that they will get shot. If this shooting is a way of solving the problems, even Sri Lankan comes here, same thing could happen.
Right.
But in the run-up period, we did see a bit of, I would say, hardening of positions because after all, the Sri Lankan Prime Minister's interview also mentioned about, look, you also had problem with the Italian mariners who were, you know, shot, who shot at fishermen, and those were very clarified actually with what Sushma's statement. I think Sushma's statement was very important. And then she said she had taken up that issue, and she also said, look, the fact that when we, you know, gave that public statement in Colombo, it was not contradicted by the Sri Lankan side. So which means, in a way, they also understand this is an humanitarian issue. But as Professor Ramani has said, as Ambassador Jha has said, that we cannot delay it any longer. We cannot just, you know, let the things go as a sort of a drift. Rather, address these issues and let the fishermen of Rameshwaram feel that actually, you know, somebody is doing something, because I don't think they want to be in that same, you know, old kind of catch situation where, you know, they go out and they get caught, they don't return, then the boats are seized, and you have the usual statements by Tamil Nadu politicians, then the New Delhi intervenes, the boat is released. This cycle, I think, they themselves would want this to end. Enough of this cycle.
Ambassador Jha, with the new political dispensation there in Sri Lanka, and with the fact that, of course, the government also has renewed its focus and, you know, its attention towards Sri Lanka, do you think this is indeed a kind of new beginning, a new approach which is being followed here? And how important is this kind of diplomacy towards Sri Lanka for this entire region?
You see, as Prime Minister has said that it can be Sri Lanka can be a strongest economic partner. I think one thing we've not mentioned today is the CEPA agreement, CEPA, which has been pending there for a long time.
Right.
And unfortunately, there were some people around the previous president, Rapakse, who were against that agreement, and they influenced him not to look at it at all. But I think we have to plan together with Sri Lanka for a medium-term approach also on the economic side. For example, power will have to be supplied from southern India to Sri Lanka. Secondly, there's talk about the land bridge going on for many years. Let's try and work seriously on it. I mean, this will bring our two countries even together. This sort of thing, supply of power, and people able to travel across the bridge from India to Sri Lanka, this type of thing. No amount of Chinese backing or finances can match that or equal it. So why not use it? Call it soft power, medium power, whatever you like, but why not use it?
Okay. Professor Ramani, how do you look at that? Because after all, there are several, you know, the road ahead has to be seen as to how that's going to be between India and Sri Lanka.
Yeah, the first thing, like what Ambassador Jha is saying, take forward on the road bridge. Yes, that has to work. It will actually create alternate marine revenue sources for Sri Lanka, like as in whatever was till now restricted only to the Colombo and the Gal port. Now if Talaimanar could be developed, you know, that would be another source for Sri Lanka is getting its revenue. And then I think the other area where they need to seriously look at is the negative list in the free trade agreement that I was referring to. You know, I think in the entire region of the South Asian countries, about 3 to 5% of the total trade between these 8 countries is the intra-regional trade. The rest of it is all that they are doing it outside the region. So somewhere down the line, if India, Sri Lanka actually try to set their house right, then that would actually send a strong message to the entire region and say that yes, we need to look between ourselves and improve on that skewed up trade ratio. Yeah.
There's also this demand from Sri Lanka, from Colombo, that Delhi also helps them in the probe against Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa. So do you think this kind of an involvement is also there on the cards between India and Sri Lanka now?
No, I think India will not interfere in that case, because I think in January, towards January, they wanted to sign some kind of financial intelligence unit, that kind of agreement. But directly, I mean, that kind of assistance probably India will provide by signing, I mean, organizational assistance. But otherwise, India won't like to see itself directly involving in a probe against Mahinda Rajapaksa.
And do you think that when it comes to taking these ties forward, would China be one of the, is China a factor even today, and would it be a factor even tomorrow? Because after all, there are a lot of times when India has really not went ahead and used the opportunity in the past, which has been in a way used by China, and now it's time for India to cash in on that, because both the Prime Minister has said that, you know, the natural investment partner for Sri Lanka is India.
Yes, see, with China we have to understand Sri Lanka is a sovereign country. It has the right to have its relationship with any other country. We cannot control Sri Lanka on that sense. But with China, our concern was that we don't want Sri Lanka to allow China to use its territory against India. For example, last year, I mean 2014, when Xi Jinping visited, they signed this Colombo city port. Now, problem with that agreement was that by that agreement, Sri Lanka was allowing around 20 hectares of land, they were providing ownership to the Chinese on that land. Now, if China has ownership in such, and I think another 108 hectares of land on 99 years of lease. So in that case, we don't know how China is going to use that territory, because if they are given ownership, Sri Lankan government won't have any control over those lands. And though Sri Lankan government has said that we will not allow our territory against India, but if they have ownership, how they are going to use that land, we don't know. So that was that concern India had, and I think we raised this issue. And as of now, the current government, they have expressed, and they suspended this project, and probably they'll reconsider this particular clause.
Fine.
So on these issues, I think we have expressed our concern, but at the same time, since the current government, they have said that they are going to they'll have some kind of balance. I mean, they will not be like pro-Chinese, I mean, overtly pro-Chinese, which Mahinda Rajapaksa. So in that sense, I think they are addressing our concerns. So.
Okay. I'll take concluding remarks from you, Mr. Iyer. How do you look at the road ahead?
Well, I think there will be more trust, and which is very important, and that is because politics on either side, because a lot of the posturings by Rajapaksa had also a lot to do with his politics, where he was also trying to send signals to India that, look, I have China on my side. But that thing will end now. And similarly, here also a lot of our utterances, our posturing was guided or rather forced by the politics of Tamil Nadu. And now first time probably Tamil Nadu will be going to elections next year, where this issue may not, Sri Lanka will not be talked about. Not that the last election also we saw any of it. I think this is the very important, that both the countries will be able to, and also even Rajapaksa himself, is keeping politics out, because in that interview which he gave to Dawn of Pakistan, he mentioned that probably India's external spy agency, RAW, was involved, destabilizing, but not Prime Minister Modi. So, he's also, so I think it's very important that the day-to-day politics, or the politics of politicians in both the countries is, it doesn't guide, these, the issues that have to be determined by the governments of the two countries.
Fine. So on that note, we'll wrap up this discussion. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much, ladies, for joining us here. That's all we have for you in this edition of Public Forum. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.